Hello, everyone. Happy holidays to you all. Greetings from Herdacity. My name is Lorelei Gonzalez. I am the program director for Herdacity. And if you are yet unfamiliar, if only slightly, with Herdacity, we are a nonprofit dedicated to inspiring confidence in women to achieve their professional goals. We aim to be a resource for you through your career journey. And we're really happy you chose to join us today because I got an awesome end of year webinar in store for you. Now, joining me in the conversation on leadership through virtual mentorship, I have an international educator who believes in experiencing the world as a classroom. She's an active member of Women at Austin and the Young Women's Alliance, and she is the inaugural program manager for the Kendra Scott Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute at UT. Lesley Robinson.
Hi, everyone. I am so happy to be here. Thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate it, Lorelei. I have joined so many of these during my lunchtime, so I'm so happy to provide some content that hopefully is beneficial for y'all as you munch down on something I'm sure that's much more delicious than what I had right before this. But happy holidays for sure, and let's finish 2020 strong, yeah?
Yes, indeed. So thank you all for joining us. Lesley, thank you so much. And if you could take a quick minute to fill out our entry survey and our exit survey during this webinar, I would really appreciate it. Lesley, take it away.
Take away means figure out how to share my screen. So let me just get that all up and ready for y'all. And if someone give me a thumbs up that we're good to go.
Good to go.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I love the topic of mentorship. And when I think about it in this virtual world in COVID times and the pivots that we've all had to make, I was really excited to put this content together with you because it's really, what mentorship has meant to me, and also kind of how I, as a leader, and especially working with the next generation with students, kind of view mentorship in terms of like a leadership journey for students. So with that being said, I always like to get started with just a little bit of objectives of what you can expect from our time together. When I was thinking about this, like, how am I going to put all of this into about like 30, 45 minutes? And now I feel like I have too much content. And so I hope that you'll come back to this. I hope that you'll take a lot of the different content that is on the slides that I'm maybe not going to get to during the presentation, listen to it, interact with it for days or times to come, especially as I know, at least at the University of Texas at Austin, the spring semester is going to be virtual. So I feel like this is the world that we're going to be living in for just a little bit longer. So objectives, we are going to talk about what good mentorship means, and then also about like the different roles of mentorships. And so I like to think that there's 6 different roles that you need to have in your life in terms of people that are supporting you along your journey for success. Also, strategies for virtual mentorship, and then different technology tools that at least have been promising in these virtual interactions that I've had, but also some tools that I haven't been able to get to yet, and hopefully you guys can play around with and have them as recommendations too. So with that, let's get started. So when we think about understanding the importance of good mentorship, there's so many different definitions, so many different like ideologies and frameworks and everything about what mentorship means. But I always put kind of like an asterisk and a disclaimer whenever I talk about it, because this is according to me. And I've been so fortunate to have great mentors in my life that are continuing in different roles, and we'll go through those roles a little bit later. But this is what it means to me, and this is really held true through my journey, and especially a lot of the different career paths that I've taken. So let's start with just a simple definition. Let's just kind of like set the groundwork moving forward for what mentorship means. So I think at the simplest form, to all get on the same page, or I guess the same screen in these days, mentorship is a personal developmental relationship with a more experienced or more knowledgeable person who then helps a less experienced or less knowledgeable person. So I think if we can all get behind that and understanding mentorship, then that will give us kind of the base and the foundation for moving forward through the rest of the content. So I think we all can probably agree that there are a lot of different pros to mentorship, but for me, mentorship it's a two-way street, right? It's got to be mutually beneficial for both the mentor and then also the mentee. And mentees are sometimes called like proteges. So we'll just say mentee for ease for throughout the rest of the presentation. But for mentees, it's really about building the network and the connections and the confidence and the skill building from, again, those more skilled, experienced people that we strive to be, or, that we want to be when we grow up, or have a career that's similar to what we see that they have. That sounds so interesting. And, for the mentor, it's really about giving back. It's also really about then understanding your communication style, improving that, and a transfer of knowledge. It's the ultimate, give back, to be able to use your wisdom and your expertise for the next generation, and to then really like hone into the investment of that next generation. I like to say, I think a lot of people say best practices, but I like to say promising practices. And so promising practices are obviously the things that you learn on your path in your career. And maybe they're advice of what not to do, but ultimately it's like, here's how maybe you should approach it based off of my experiences, like in my knowledge base. So good mentorship, again, according to me, it's got to be that two-way street. It's the willingness and capability of both parties supporting growth, asking questions, challenging assumptions, and disagreeing, all while intentionally engaging with one another. So from both sides, supporting growth, asking questions, challenging assumptions, and disagreeing. And I think that is the relationship that happens. And ideally, it is constructive criticism that you're getting along the way. It is words of affirmation. It is encouragement. It is, reality checks. It's gut checks. It's also really in all efforts getting you to your why. And I think putting that focus then in on like, what is it that you want to do? Who do you want to be when you grow up? What is your why? What is the thing that gets you up in the morning and really, sets you on a path for success? So in this virtual world, right, like mentorship in general, but also thinking about it through the virtual lens, it's interesting because engagement is a term that's coming up a lot in COVID times, and it's a word that I use a lot, and how to best engage in a virtual world. So when we look at some of the recent research that's out about just employee engagement, 30% of remote employees say that they are engaged with their organization. So that's not very high. And for me, and something that I've seen, especially with the different organizations that I've been involved with, or some of the students that I'm working with, is that, virtual mentorship is a way to then increase that engagement, student engagement, employee engagement, staff engagement, however you want to say it. I really do think that this is the way to go. And so I think mentorship, and especially the investment of mentorship, is the clearest way that an employee can, or I should say an employer can show support in their workforce, in their staff, because it just then is that dedication to their growth plan. And I think, to put structured programs into place, to talk about what those programs to look like, to revise plans for what those programs look like, it's all in good efforts to show that you're invested in the personal growth, professional growth of your workforce. There's a term that's been coming up in 2020, and I wanted to throw it out here because I do think that in this virtual world, it's really important when we think about mentorship. There's also like the emotional aspect of it. So if you haven't heard about emotional stewardship, I want to introduce it here, or if you have, just kind of spend a little bit of time on it, because I think that it goes hand in hand in terms of mentorship and some of the goals that that employers have for engaging in Zoom, or all the different platforms that exist. But at the most basically like level, I would say that growing research has shown that like intentional mentorship programs have a positive impact about the promotion and opportunity gaps, and gaps that keep women and people of color from advancing within organizations. And so that is always going to be, one of the biggest pros in my eyes, in my books, about what mentorship can provide. But when we think about it in terms of like the pandemic, and as a solution for engagement. I've really found that mentorship breaks down organizational silos, and especially then creates what this term is, this emotional stewardship term. So when we manage with emotional stewardship, it means that we're prioritizing long-term inclusive decisions that help the entire organization. So it's really then placing the priority on the emotional well-being of your staff, prioritizing that, and really being more of like a cohesive group, a cohort, if you will, instead of doing this more individually. And so I think that emotional stewardship and especially mentorship both have frameworks that see the interaction through a lens of long-term relationship and steady development. And I just think that it's something to be considered, especially if you're new to building mentorship programs or are trying to tweak and figure out how to pivot in the virtual times, to really kind of include this emotional aspect, this emotional stewardship into the frameworks that you currently have. I love to do like female founder focus. And so if you're from Austin, I hope you've heard of the mentor method. And if you're not from Austin, because I saw a couple people saying where they're from, check them out. So the mentor method is led by Janice Omadeki here in Austin. And I've had the privilege to work with her as a panelist for some of the events that we do at the Well Institute, and also have seen her just out and about in the community, especially the Dell Women's Entrepreneur Network community. But the mentor method is a software that helps forward, or I should say, sorry, I'm going to read this so I get it right. It's a software that helps forward-thinking companies affordably match diverse talent to mentors within their organization, so diverse talent is more likely to succeed, stay, and grow in their career. And it's just a really beautiful, structured, intentional way to be inclusive, to be intentional about how to have mentorship as part of your identity, as part of an offering, as part of, a service or a benefit for your students or your staff. So I'm going to say students because that's the population that I work with, but check them out. They're awesome. Janice is such a rock star, so eloquent, and also just so well respected in terms of the mentor field. So I do want to give a shout out to her and the mentor method, because they're really doing innovative work in the space. And I think that what she has to offer. And I've heard her talk a lot about mentorship as a trifecta for employee morale. And I think that that's really what it's about. It's us investing in employees and trying to increase engagement, which then ultimately increases morale, which then increases retention, right? So it's all a win-win. But according to Janice, that trifecta is providing a safe space to discuss feelings. It's connecting talent to resources that build resiliency. And number 3, it's showing an investment in professional and personal development, which can offer, of course, as we know, peace of mind, and also keep us grounded and invested in the work that we're doing. So check them out. I think leadership, mentorship, I think that it goes hand in hand, because I think to be a good leader, you have to be a mentor, and you have to be willing to invest in your mentees, in the transfer of knowledge, in the future of who you're working in, and to have their back, advocate for them, and really kind of share your network. And so that kind of then is going to be the lead into the next section, is just how to be a good leader, and obviously then how that equals being a good mentor. So I think that there's a couple different roles that you have in life. And so we'll go through those. And I think probably some of you have heard of these different roles, and maybe there's a few that you hadn't considered. But, mentor has a lot of different definitions, and we started off with just a very base definition. But, it's also hard sometimes to see the difference between being a mentor and being a coach. And I think that these roles are interchangeable, and I think that they come and go. But I think it's important to kind of know which is which. And so mentors are obviously concerned with the development of the whole person. Mentors also tend to be a little bit less structured. There's no given time, there's no given outcomes, there's no really kind of given objectives with mentors. it's the ultimate kind of like informational interview, if you will, in terms of wanting to meet with someone who is on a career path that you would like to mimic, or, you know, has done incredible things in their life, or you find that they're really balanced and you want to learn from them. And so it tends to be more of kind of like a one-off offering, or, you know, has a purpose and then has a clear end. Coaches are going to be all about achieving specific objectives. It's a little bit more formal, it's a little bit more structured, and they usually are focused on helping you solve the problem. Maybe that's getting a job, maybe that is increasing your skill set in a certain area. Maybe that is just helping you identify what you're good at. So what is it that are your strengths? So I think, you know, it's important to kind of understand that those terms might be a little bit blurry, but I do think it's important to understand how then you can clearly define who it is that you need and what it is then that they would provide. So 2 other roles that I think are part of mentor leadership is cheerleaders and critics and challengers. So cheerleaders are your rah-rah people. They are your go-to, they are your rock, they are the call that you make when you're really excited about something, or they're the call that you make when you're really bummed about something. I think that they're like I always say you're happy and you're crappy, right? So they're your go-to person, and that could be family, that could be close friends, but they're an important piece of your journey, and recognize that that is a role, and especially as a leader, that's a role that sometimes you need to play as well. And then, you know, you've got your critics and your challengers, all in constructive, good intentions. It's coming from the right place. It's trying to put mentees back on track. It's trying to have accountability. And I think the most important role of a critic is to just have you consider different perspectives. And I think that that's always so good. So look for the critics and the challengers, because they're going to be the ones that have you look from different sides of the equation, and they'll be the ones that maybe make you have the aha moment because you hadn't considered a specific way. And then we have the devil's advocate. So devil's advocate are going to be the people who are going to keep you on the path that you intended, the path that you said that you're going to be on. They are going to be I like to say they're going to keep you on your why, and they're going to keep you honest in terms of redirecting to what I like to call your North Star. So they're the ones who are going to put you back into where it is that you're hoping to go. And you can't get it through a presentation with me without talking about the why and how important that is. And so the devil's advocate, in my opinion, is a crucial leadership component or person to have in your life, or role for you to play for others, because it makes you pause, and it makes you have the conversation and the self-reflection, the self-assessment, maybe really in terms of what your why is. Your why is your most important part of your growth, because as I said, it's your North Star. It's going to keep you going. It's going to be your good guy or your bad guy. It's going to be your mission. It's going to be your vision. It's going to be everything that comes from you. And so if you don't know your why, then how would you know what mentor or coach or cheerleader you need in your life if you don't have that end result or that end destination? So my advice is take the time to find your why, and it will help you focus on what is important, how you're going to do it, who it is you need to meet to get where you want or need to go. So those are some roles that I want you to consider are important that to have in your life, or maybe to play in someone else's life. So again, I think that there's 6. We went through 5, and I think the 6th one is actually a mentee. So how do you become a good mentee? You become a mentor. Everybody has experience. Everyone has a place to give back. Everyone has knowledge to share. Everyone has, you know, a life journey, promising practices, again, what I like to say. And so I think that you also need to have mentees in your life. And if you're young, that could be high schoolers or middle schoolers or elementary schoolers or kids. I mean, there's always something that you can give back. And so I think that it's crucial that you have the full picture in your life of, maybe being a mentee to someone else, but also then being a mentor to someone. So take that into heart, because then I think you really understand how to be a good mentor if then you're a mentee to someone and vice versa. So let's take a minute. I've been talking for a while. I'm gonna take a sip of water, but let's reflect. Think about who in your life plays these different roles for you, or on the flip, maybe what roles do you play for someone else? So is there anyone missing? Do you have all 6 checked? Do you need all 6? It's just something to consider. So let's take just a few seconds and think about these 6 people, these 6 roles in your life. What do you think? I did this exercise as well, and the person I think I'm really missing out on is the devil's advocate. So I'm going to recruit a devil's advocate if such a thing is recruitable. All right, we'll come back to this. I hope it's helpful in terms of kind of thinking about, the broader, grander scheme of mentorship and the 6 different people that I think are crucial in terms of keeping you to your why, cheerleading you along the way, helping you understand your strengths, and also, being that resource of wealth of knowledge for you of what it is that you want to be when you grow up. And I think you should always ask yourself that question. So I want to talk a little bit more and dig in a little bit more to the role of the mentee, because I'm going to assume that a lot of people on this call have been mentors before, but probably are more like searching for mentors. And so it's important, I think, that the mentee owns the mentor relationship and really, takes accountability for how that is going to grow and nurture that. And so my advice to mentees, and I will tell this to my students as well, is that you have to be eager to learn and you have to be coachable. And I've worked with a lot of founders in my life, and coachable is one of the most important aspects of being able to take input and take feedback and move on and get past the problem. So be coachable, actively listen, be specific, know what it is that you want, especially if it's a person that you want to learn from. What are the questions? How did they get there? Don't keep it vague. Do your research before, have it prepared, ask for feedback. And I think, the other thing that gets lost in transaction, if you will, is, sending updates like, hey, we talked, 2 months ago or 5 months ago, and I just wanted you to know that connection that you made for me, or that piece of advice that you gave me, or that website you directed me to is, came in helpful, and here's where I'm at. And I just wanted to give you an update. That's huge. And it just keeps the relationship going. And I don't see that happen very often with some of the mentees that I've had, or some of the informational interviews that I've done. And I always appreciate it when something that maybe I put out into the world, or a connection that I made, or a resource that I shared actually was helpful, because then it lets me know, okay, that's a resource that I need to tell other people about, and it's been validated. And finally, thank your mentor. It's the holiday season. If you've had people in your life that have helped you on your journey, send a thank you card and let them know how much you appreciate their advice, but also their time. We all know time is limited and it's our most valuable asset, and we need to just take the time. I will always be the huge advocate for a handwritten thank you card. So an email is fine, but try the handwritten thank you card. And I think that will do wonders in terms of just giving back to the mentor and telling them how much you appreciate them. I've actually got this on my to-do list for this weekend with some of my holiday cards. So just take a moment and do that. I have a few stats. I'm not going to go through all of these, but in terms of the next generation and the students, definitely that engagement piece, and the stats are telling us that millennials, the big one at the bottom is 49% of millennials would quit their current jobs in the next 2 years if they had a chance. And so when I like see these stats and I wonder like, oh gosh, what can we do and how can we have the next generation stay, and like what does the investment look like? And I've said it, again at the very beginning, I really think it's through mentorship and that investment in personal and professional growth and sharing connections and resources and having that relationship be ongoing. And so the investment in a mentorship program, if you're in a space or a position to do that at your company or to revisit the one that you have, I think that this is really where some of these stats are going to change and go up and have more engaged employees. And so I wanted to share these because this is the population that I work with the most. And I think that they're the hungriest in terms of advice and wanting to know all of the things and meet all the people and, have the clear set path, the guidebook, if you will, on how to get the job or how to get the promotion or how to ask for the raise. So I think that this is where mentors, coaches, cheerleaders, all of it can really kind of fill that void. So just some interesting stats to put out there. All right, so when we think about virtual mentorship, there's a couple different things that I've got some advice on, right? So like always according to Lesley. And I think that a lot of this, maybe if you've been in other presentations with me, it's repeats, but there's some networking that goes into this as well. And so I'm going to go through all of these, but it's my kind of like 9 pieces of advice. And one is get inspiration from your inbox. And I'll go through these in more depth too. 2 is look around instead of above. 3 is be more than your resume. 4, always ask yourself what you want to be when you grow up. And I think I said that earlier in the presentation too, so I really mean it. 5 is know yourself and then your leadership potential. 6 is drink a lot of matcha lattes. So that gets back to kind of the love of networking, and especially in these times, virtual networking. 7 is master the affordable email. 8 is create your personal brand value statement. And 9 is technology as a relationship builder. So I am like a very tactical person. I like check boxes. I like check like bullets and things of that sort. So I think that when I think about mentorship and virtual mentorship, all of these are the different components to make it successful for both aspects, right? From the mentor and the mentee, I think they're equally important for each. So when we talk about getting inspiration from your inbox, if you don't have a formal mentor, if you don't have a formal cheerleader, there are some incredible organizations, Herdacity being one of them, who are putting out some really inspiring, empowering content in newsletters that are going straight to whatever folder you have them tagged on. They're in my forums folder. And I spend every morning kind of looking at the different orgs that I align with and that I, get a lot of my information and my inspiration from, but also just then to read stories of other incredible women and what they're doing. And other women that I might like to know, or that I would, maybe love to have come and speak to our students at the Kendra Scott Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute. So there's a lot of inspiration that maybe you're missing out on. There's a lot of newsletters I can recommend too that, are that daily dose of inspiration. I personally also love Thrive Global, and I get a lot of stories and advice and resources and just like, aha moments from there. So it doesn't have to be, a formal person too. It could also be an organization that could provide you with inspiration. 2 is looking around instead of above. So colleagues, right? Colleagues can also be your mentors. It doesn't have to be someone who is, a different title or a level above you, or, in a different line of the hierarchy. So just think too that there's, peers right next to you and right beside you that could also serve in some of those roles that we went through. 3 is be more than your resume. And that is, don't just limit yourself to one page. Don't just limit yourself to bullets. Don't just send your resume to someone without, fleshing out and telling them who you are as a person versus what you've done. So I think that that's really important, because I think a lot of people, at least in my experience, have sent resumes, asking for informational interview. And I don't really know what that has to do with the conversation besides kind of tell me like where you came from, but I want to know who you are. Always ask yourself what you want to be when you grow up, because I think that is the question we all need to ask ourselves, we pivot. And there's a great quote that I love that is, you know, when life goes a different direction, you know, we all say pivot, and especially in the startup world, but I personally also like to say like plot twist, right? Like own it, plot twist, like let's go with it and let's see where it leads us. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Number 5 is know yourself and then know your leadership potential. So I see someone's chat. Yeah, right. 2020 is the biggest plot twist of them all, right? So we made it almost, like got a few more days left in 2020. So know yourself, know your leadership potential. I think that your superpower is knowing your weaknesses. Obviously, knowing your strengths is really important, but knowing your weaknesses is even better. So spend some time, invest in knowing your weaknesses. And then I say drink a lot of matcha lattes because I don't like coffee, but have the informational interviews, have the virtual coffee dates. In fact, I'll talk about an app a little bit later on that helps facilitate this. Build the relationship, make the ask, and, you know, buy someone's coffee to share their experience. I love to do this because, one, I love to try new places in Austin, you know, when we're not in COVID times, but I have been having a lot of like coffee dates outside and socially distanced. So it does get me out of the house sometimes, but I do think it's great to reach out and do those. 7 is master the forwardable email. Do the work for someone and have them, you know, write what you need to be forwarded on to make an introduction. Write who you are and what it is that you want specifically. 8 is create your personal brand value statement. And so know who you are. And I've got an example of this further down in the slides that you can use. But then also that personal brand value statement can be your intro in an email. It can be your tagline on your LinkedIn. It can be your intro in a message. So it has a lot of different uses. And I think that there's value in taking the time to do that. And then number 9 is technology as a relationship builder. So some of the tools that can help with the engagement, and especially, you know, as we live through more virtual times. But also I think this is the next new normal. I think that, you know, we need to embrace the tools that exist and have them work for us and not against us. So those are my promising practices and kind of just being a virtual mentor and mentee. These are the things that have worked for me. I definitely have more on these slides. So I think I mentioned to you, like, I hope that you'll go back to this presentation and read some of the different things on those that I mentioned, especially, you know, as I mentioned, the brand value statement. I have my example here that you could pull from, but I do think that the last one is another really important. So that's going to spend the rest of the time together talking about, which is technology as a relationship builder. So virtual mentoring programs obviously are on the rise. And so I think that they're great because they equal long-term engagement. And I think that there actually are some pros of being in this virtual world. So I think that going virtual actually creates more access, right? Because geography then doesn't become a barrier, and that equals potentially more matches or more people that you can meet. But also I think there's more flexibility in terms of 8 to 5 being the only time that maybe you can meet with someone. I think that, you know, as schedules get flexible, as people are commuting more, I really think that there's now an opportunity to chat with people and do healthy things while doing it. So for example, like walking and talking and spending some time with someone on a phone, I think is also a really healthy thing to move forward with in this next new normal. But also, you know, there's some pretty incredible data points that you can get from some of the tools that are out there to use. So I do think that there are some pros to this virtual mentorship. I have a lot of promising practices on mentoring programs. I mentioned some of them right before, especially like the walking and talking and being, you know, kind of, I guess, like multi-purpose with the time that you have now. But one of the biggest things is that mentorship doesn't have to be now one-on-one or individual. I think one of the greatest things is it can actually connect people in terms of cohorts, in terms of building community. So I think it can also be a great community builder. So I think that there's, you know, also something to be said about mentees learning from mentees in this time and using mentoring as, you know, that chance to bring together people who wouldn't maybe normally interact with one another. So finally, there's some virtual engagement tools that are working well for me, and maybe they're new to you. Maybe you're like, these are like tried and true and old news, but they're the ones that are kind of getting me through, not having the face-to-face interactions with the students that I'm working with right now. So number one is Slack. Huge Slacker. I love Slack. Get with the program. Students are on Slack. I'm on, I think, like 12 different Slack workspaces. So if you invest in Slack, I really do think it's one of the great community building tools that are out there. If you're not on Slack, come join us on the Kendra Scott Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute Slack. You can go to that website at the bottom. You can join the channels, try it out, see if you like it, see if you don't. But I do invite everyone to come and join that and just get updates on what it is that we're doing in the Well Institute, or try out Slack for the first time. We'd love to have you part of our workspace. Number two is LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn is, it's a tool that you have to invest in. So LinkedIn Pro is definitely something I think that you invest in, but I think if you use it, LinkedIn works for you instead of against you. So invest in LinkedIn. I really can't talk about it enough. In fact, I could do a whole nother presentation on LinkedIn. Number three is Trello. So Trello is great in terms of cheerleading and doing different workflows. So it's the tool that I love so much in terms of just organizing workflow, seeing who's doing what, hearting things, calling out things. So I love Trello as well. Donut is an app that is really just facilitates virtual coffees with random matches. And so if you're on a Slack channel with a lot of people, so for example, Well Institute, I think has like 400 plus people on it right now, it will randomly match you with someone, and then it encourages you and like gives you prompts to like set up that meeting and conversation starters. So I really love Donut. It's a Slack app add-on. So try it out or join the Well Institute one. And number five is Lunch Club. So I've got a little invite club, but it's kind of like Donut, except for it will randomly match you with someone on the Lunch Club platform. And then you can randomly have lunch with someone. And I've done this a couple of times. And especially if, 2020 and COVID has, equaled a lonely time for you, this is great to then filter people that are interests that you might like to know, or career professions or skill sets. So I really like it for that purpose. So try Lunch Club. And then 6 is different organizational platforms. So in addition to Slack, I'm noticing that different organizational platforms, and these are the ones that I'm on, Young Women's Alliance, like the DWIN, Dell Technologies one, and Prowess Project, are coming up with their own specific customized organization platforms. And I think that that's pretty incredible to then really get to know an organization that you're involved in. 7, simple poll. It's just a really quick reaction to how people are feeling. And so again, it's another kind of Slack add-on, but I love to kind of gauge how the temperature is in like a channel, or what students are thinking, or what the community members would want, what topic would be of interest. So I love simple poll too. All right. I don't have time to tell you this because I don't know any of these, but these are other engagement tools that I'd like to try, but don't have time to try. So if some of the other ones were kind of boring or been there, done that, and you're kind of like, give me the innovative new stuff, well, here you go. Here's some other tools, and I'd love to hear if any of them were of value or use to you. We did it. So that is, virtual mentorship in terms of, my experiences, how I've, incorporated in some of the work that I do. But I would love to kind of know if there's any promising practices or any things that have resonated with y'all, any questions that you have that I can, answer right now.
Excellent. And now is the time for questions. Fam, please use the Q&A button at the bottom or the chat feature to send your questions over for Lesley to answer. Now, Lesley, I want to harken back to the beginning of your deck where you talked about emotional stewardship. Could you share a little bit more about emotional stewardship as part of a model of leadership?
Yeah, so I think, the emotional, and I should say, like, this looks and sounds a lot of different ways. And I love that emotional stewardship is kind of a new word to encapsulate, empathy. And we're seeing a lot of leaders that are leading with empathy. And so I think one way that I would say that I've used it in my practice, and this might seem kind of silly, and I see actually some of my student interns that are joining us today, but it's taking the moment at the beginning of a meeting and asking, tell me the happy and tell me the crappy, like, but really, like, let's spend some time together and talk about the happy and the crappy and spend some time with that. And collectively as a group, understanding what other people are going through, what hardships. So then collectively, it's understanding maybe who needs more support that week, or who can lend more of a hand, or what you've got going on in the background, like literally the background, because we can see everyone's lives now, and hear maybe, some of the distractions or things that are in the background. But those are some like tangible examples that I've used. But I love this term in terms of like moving forward and thinking more collectively as a group, and especially like in mentorship, going back to that point in promising practices of creating community with mentorship and cohorts going together and having mentees come together to learn from each other too. And it goes again back to that point of like not looking up, but looking across to like your colleagues and things of that sort. So I think emotional stewardship is leaders really understanding that that's one of the priorities that they need to take from, learn from 2020, is that this is how they're going to move forward. And, empathy is going to be the way to do that.
Indeed. Excellent point. Now, Melinda wants to know, how can she find a good mentor or coach at the personal level? Since you mentioned the mentor method earlier, she said that looks more of a corporate sort of vibe. So do you have any recommendations on getting a mentor and or a coach on a one-on-one capacity?
Yeah. So it sounds really cheesy, but it actually is like my advice that I give a lot. And it is like, I want to be you when I grow up. Like, can I learn from you? Can you share with me? Like, your career journey is one that I really admire. And I think just naming it, like, would you be willing to, sit and have coffee? Would you be willing to mentor me after you had that coffee, right? To see if it would be a good match, and really doing the research and the homework. But I think it's naming it. It's like, I would really love it if you would mentor me in this. I want to be you when I grow up because of this. And so I think it's finding LinkedIn profiles and people that have had cool careers, or reading articles and reaching out and asking that specific ask. And I know that sounds so simple, but I've had a lot of LinkedIn messages that have then led to virtual coffees that have, equaled then talking specifically about maybe something in my past. So I think it's naming and saying, will you mentor me in this?
Well, to piggyback right off of your point to make the ask, what about when you get an assigned mentor or mentee from an organization like the Young Women's Alliance?
Yeah, right. I know that we both participate in that. And this is something I'm loving actually about virtual mentorship, and just, I guess if it's a field, but mentorship in general, is that there are these like awesome algorithms coming out and filters in terms of, being matched with someone who you want to be matched with, that is a good match, that makes sense. But before you get a mentor, again, you have to go back to your why and understand, what is it you want from that relationship? What is it you want from that person? And using Young Women's Alliance as an example, I really need help right now in research and research methodology, because I'm a PhD student and I've got the topic, and I need someone to kind of cheerlead and help me through that. And so I was matched with someone who has been through that journey and that process before, but that's because I can name it and I could filter it and I could, get so specific about it. So if you don't know what you need or want, I don't know how you're going to get a good match.
Okay, understood. Now, we have a question about getting involved with maybe the Kendra Scott Leadership Institute. They ask about the best process to connect with the Kendra Scott Leadership Institute. Do y'all provide mentors?
We do. We actually, so it's interesting because I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about the Kendra Scott Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute and use the personal brand statement as a way to do that. But we are at the University of Texas at Austin, and we are a brand new institute. We just were launched a year ago. We do have mentorship, but it is student led. So it is led in partnership with the Well Institute by a student organization called Genesis, who is using, like the mentor method or Young Women's Alliance as reference checks to help them build their own mentor, but is to match students with community members with very intentional algorithms, again, to make those matches. So we do it, but it's more of a student-led initiative.
Understood. Now, in regard to having a mentor and you have been matched in whatever way that occurred, what happens if you think that you might not be a good fit to work together? How do you gracefully exit that relationship?
Yeah, and I think that that's where you need to know what it is that you want. And I do truly believe that the mentee has to take a lot of that ownership of the relationship, because if you're not getting what you need, or you are not communicating well what you need, or you didn't fill out the form, in depth enough to say what it is that you need, and it is a bad match, I think you just call it what it is. I think that there's always learning to happen when you meet someone new. So I think that you always need to have the conversation. But if that person doesn't seem to have a good fit, or maybe there is just a misunderstanding on, what your ask is, again, thank them for the time, thank them for the expertise, but ask for the connection, ask for the next person. If it's not you, do you know someone who could provide me with advice on, I don't know, research methodology or whatever it is that you need. I'm just using my personal example, and see if they can open up their network to you, because also a mentor is a wealth of new possible additional friends or mentors or colleagues, because of the network that they have cultivated over the years. So I would see who else they can connect you with, whether it's a bad match or a good match. I think that, I think it's a great ask to make.
Well, I want to ask you the most basic question we might have, and I think that can stump a lot of people. How do you know when you're ready to mentor someone? Like, it seems really foundational, but it also seems like a really big hurdle.
Well, and I think that goes back to the definition of mentor. And I think everyone's got to get on the same page with it, because it can be as formal or as informal as it's set up. But I think it's all about managing expectations, right? So if you're, if you are not sure if you're ready to be a mentor, like, do you have the time? Do you have the energy? Do you have the investment? And I think that's the biggest question you can ask yourself, to have a conversation that could lead on to a year-long or years-long relationship with someone. Do you have that investment in you to do that? It's got to be a right time in your life that you've got the time to give. That's number one to me. Yeah.
Okay. When thinking about that, going a little more in depth, what about for those of us who kind of come up against that wall of imposter syndrome, maybe thinking that maybe we don't have the experience when we really do?
Well, and I think that goes back to like the give back. Like, how do you know if you're a good mentor is then be a good mentee? And I think that everyone has life experiences to share. And maybe, it's getting involved with a high school organization, like there's a lot of different organizations out there, but maybe it's mentoring a younger age and trying to talk someone through the high school experience, or if you went to college, then college application season, or whatever it is that you went through that you think that you can give back. I think look back on your life experiences, and maybe instead of maybe your professional experiences, as a give back.
That's a wonderful call out, Lesley. Thank you so much for that. And lastly, I think we have a compliment hidden in a question, asking about how do you do it? Balance your life and your professionalism and your personal professional growth, as well as preparing some epic presentations like the one you just showed us today.
Well, thank you for that compliment. I really appreciate it. It's not pretty and polished. And I think, the statements that I've come up with, or the mantras of 2020 for me, have been patience and grace, and thankful and grateful. And I always am prioritizing the things that bring me joy. And that comes at the expense of saying no to a lot of things. But the things I say yes about are the things that I get really excited about and are worth the time, or, the post bedtime, presentation making. And it goes back to my why. I mean, in this season of life, I want to give back and empower women. And I think that I've got some advice to do that from, just the women who have given back to me. And so I also truly love to live by, and it's so true, but I love the term empowered women empower women. And so an invitation to talk with Herdacity and to give back on something that has meant so much to me and the mentors in my life. And I'm going to call out Dr. Cheryl Madley, who has been a mentor to me for, more than a decade. She was my first boss. This is, kind of the give back from what she was able to give me. So I think that there's good karma in that.
Excellent. Well, to share the good karma, Lesley, please share your contact information so that
Oh,
we can all
yeah.
follow up with you.
I didn't go to that slide. Oh, hold on. There we go. It's a little bit more blurry than I had intended, but we talked about, I would have talked about business cards. So here's my virtual business card, but LinkedIn for sure is the best way to get at me. Send me a message and I would love to connect on LinkedIn. I also have a Calendly that has, matcha latte dates on it. So if you want to schedule a virtual matcha latte, then, I'm happy to send you my Calendly link to do that.
Love that. Thank you so much for that. Everyone, take a quick screenshot so you can connect with Lesley after this. Lesley, you have been incredible.
Thank you so much.
To thank everyone. We are so glad you joined us today and any other times that you joined us this year. Herdacity is really, really grateful for your participation, your support, your enthusiasm for the work that we're doing in our community. And it's not possible without wonderful folks like Lesley and maybe even folks that are watching today. If you think you're interested in helping support the work that we do, please reach out to us. Herdacity.org. We have a contact us page. We would love to hear from you, hear how we can support you in your career journey, and any other resources we have. They are available to you on our website for free. So check them out. We will be back in 2021 with some epic stuff coming to you. Now, I'm Lorelei. Lesley, so grateful for your attendance today. And I can't wait to see y'all in 2021. Bye-bye 2020. We're done.